You'll hear tonight about the incredible use by our students, our young people. This is the #1 issue in high schools, not only here in Fall River, but across the Commonwealth. So many students are vaping and experimenting with vaping. The presentation this evening, you're going to hear from Marissa Vital. She's with the Mass Tobacco Free Community Partnership. And Allison Perron-Drag, Government Relations for she's the director of American Heart Association. She's not going to be won't be part of the presentation, but she's certainly here for any questions that you may have. Also, we'll hear from Ann Dargan, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Schools from Fall River. And we have some public health individuals here from Fall River Public Schools who, if you have any questions, will be available as well. So without going on any further, I'd like to ask Marissa if she could start. Thank you.
So my name is Marissa Vital. I am the program manager of the Southeast Tobacco Free Community Partnership. This community partnership is one of a number of community partnerships which are funded through the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts to cover the entire state. Just a disclaimer, we don't receive any funding from the tobacco or vaping industries. Sorry, I'm still figuring out this clicker. So we're completely funded through the Department of Public Health, just to make that very clear. So just a brief agenda. Today we're going to talk about why we're here. We're going to talk about the vaping industry and the tobacco industry tactics that are used to target kids with these addictive products. We're going to actually talk about those products, and I do have some products here today for you to see and look at and smell and really see how small they actually are. I'm going to go over some resources, some what you can do's, and answer any questions that you have. So why are we here? We're all here because we care about our youth. Over the past the past couple of years, we've seen a really big rise in the number of youth who are using e-cigarettes. From 2007, I'm sorry, not 2007, from 1995 until 2017, we saw the youth use rate of combustible cigarettes, so just traditional cigarettes, drop significantly. And over the past few years, we've seen youth use of e-cigarettes, electronic nicotine delivery products, rise quite a lot. Currently, about 20% of Massachusetts high schoolers report using e-cigarettes currently, within the past 30 days. About 40% report that they have ever tried these products. Those numbers are very high compared with rates of combustible cigarette use, which in 2017 were around 6.5%. So we're here because we really, really care about the health and the well-being of youth who are now, they're using tobacco and nicotine products at higher rates again. We're gonna learn about the products and we wanna learn what we can do to help. So sort of the underlying issue here when we talk about tobacco and nicotine products, it's the nicotine. So e-cigarettes, vapes, vape pens, and I'm gonna sort of go over how we categorize these products, but the bottom line is that they almost always contain nicotine. Nicotine is a very powerful and addictive drug. It's particularly harmful to the developing brain. The earlier someone starts using nicotine, the stronger that addiction is, the harder it is to quit, and nicotine can cause permanent changes and damage to the developing brain. Lowering of impulse control, changes in the parts of the brain that control learning and attention, and it can also lead to mood disorders like anxiety and depression. People who start using tobacco or nicotine in adolescence, they smoke more or they use that nicotine or tobacco product more, and they have a harder time quitting. The earlier you start, the longer you are likely to use. The tobacco industry knows this. The vaping industry knows this. They have historically used tactics to intentionally target young people with these addictive products. The tactics are they make the products sweet, they make the products cheap, and they make the products easy to get. There are over 8,000 flavors of e-liquids. And I'll go into a little bit more what an e-liquid is in a couple of minutes, but that's the liquid part of an e-cigarette. Over 8,000 flavors. This picture up on the screen, this is not e-cigarette products, but these are other tobacco products flavored, mixed in with candy, chapstick, and things like that. So you can see strawberry banana, probably a grape somewhere in there, little mini cigars. These are flavored products, lots and lots of flavors in these types of products as well. Young people are the predominant users of flavored products, and that's why the tobacco and vaping industries use this tactic of sweet to get young people interested and ultimately addicted to these products. You can see here, even among adult age groups, the younger adults are using flavored tobacco products more than the older adults. As the age groups go up, the percentage using flavored products goes down. Like I said, thousands of flavors of e-liquids, and when we talk specifically about e-cigarettes and vaping, the flavors are largely have been responsible for making vaping seem harmless. I'm sure you all have heard from a young person, or maybe not from a young person, that the liquid in their e-cigarette or vape pen was just flavored water, or just juice, or just flavoring, without a real understanding that there is almost always nicotine as part of these e-liquids. And the flavors are a big piece of why there's that misperception. So in 2009, the FDA banned the sale of flavored cigarettes. So going back to combustible, traditional, or regular cigarettes. They exempted mint, menthol, and wintergreen. This is important because mint, menthol, and wintergreen are still flavors. Just like apple or grape or bubblegum is a flavor, mint, menthol, and wintergreen are flavors, but they're exempt from this ban of flavored cigarettes. The chemical compound of menthol actually makes a combustible cigarette easier to smoke. It sort of has an anesthetic effect on the throat, making it less harsh, easier to smoke. And menthol cigarettes actually are more appealing to young, inexperienced smokers because of this. And research shows that they're actually more likely to addict youth. Deliberate tobacco industry targeting of menthol to black populations historically and continually has contributed to a disproportionately higher use rate of menthol cigarettes among black adults. So this is a racial equity and a health equity issue as well that we have to include in the conversation when we talk about flavors and when we talk about tobacco. One of the things that local towns, and this is specifically municipal, so town by town, regulations that I'm going to talk about that towns can put into effect is they can restrict the sale of all of these flavors, including mint, menthol, and wintergreen, to adult-only stores. So these numbers are a little old. It's 167 currently. So the updated number, you can see it's even risen quite a bit since this, which I think, March 2019. So you can see it's already gone up. Lots and lots of towns in Massachusetts have done this. And this is a really important step in restricting youth access to and youth exposure to. So the idea behind this is when young people are going into some place like a convenience store or a gas station every day or 3-4 times a week, maybe after sports practice or after school, they're continually seeing these flavored tobacco products. The increased exposure can lead to increased likelihood of ever using some of these products, and that's the regulation that some towns have put into place to sort of deal with that. Another tactic that the industry uses is they make these products cheap, and youth are very price sensitive. What I've heard from a lot of schools is that young people are actually often pooling their money to share a device when talking about e-cigarettes because the devices can be a little more expensive. They'll share the device and maybe buy their own nicotine components specifically. But there are also often coupons, sales. You can see here just a couple of examples, and these are a little bit old, but you can see a $1.06 purchase. That's getting that individual, they're getting a device, an e-cigarette device, a pod with flavored nicotine in it, and a charger, all for $1.06. So very, very cheap. Again, town by town, boards of health can put in regulations. They can put in minimum pricing regulations in terms of really cheap single cigars. And again, we know that youth are price sensitive. For every 10% increase in price, we see a 7% reduction in youth smoking. And then the third tactic is this tactic of easy to get. So like I mentioned, when young people are seeing tobacco products every day or multiple times a week, it sends the message that this is normal or okay, and in reducing the availability, reducing the access to tobacco and nicotine products, we can really reduce the normalcy. We can change the narrative. We can change the message of availability and reduce youth initiation to these products. Again, this data is a little old. It's from March, but as of March 2019, 125 towns have capped the number of tobacco retail licenses. Some towns will just put a cap, say at 25, and they'll keep it at 25. Other towns will put a cap at 25, and then say maybe as any retailer closes, that number will decrease. So it'll be a cap, but it will continually decrease. Some other things that towns have done is they've put in regulations prohibiting both the distance from a tobacco retailer in a school, but then also regulations in terms of how close to one another tobacco retailers can be, to really get at that issue of how much tobacco density is there in a location. So the good news and the bad news, we know that local strategies do work in terms of reducing youth use and youth access to tobacco and nicotine products. The really unfortunate bad news that you all know, you're all here to learn about it, is that the tobacco and vaping industries, they're using the same tactics, and they are currently quite successful in addicting a new generation of young people on tobacco and nicotine. So we've really got to take action at this point. You can see on this graph, as industry advertising dollars go up or went up, youth use of e-cigarettes also went up. There was a lot of money spent to target youth with these flavored, cheap, easy-to-get products, and we saw quite a dramatic increase in youth use of them. So, to get to the main attraction, the main topic here, what exactly is vaping? So what are we really talking about? I mentioned some of these other tobacco products like the little mini cigars, and I have some to show you, but really what youth are using is e-cigarettes, is vape products. So what do they look like? Is it just water vapor? I will show you what they look like, and no, it is not just water vapor. So right here on the screen, just to kind of give you some numbers, and again, this is old. This is 2017 data. But again, about 20% of high schoolers did report current use of e-cigarettes in 2017. Comparatively, only 6.5% reported that they were using combustible cigarettes. You can see that's a really big difference. The main issue here is e-cigarette use. Again, some middle school data, you can see the number for e-cigarettes is 9.9% had ever tried e-cigarettes. When you compare that with a combustible cigarette, you see a big gap in those numbers. Only about 4.5% of middle schoolers had ever tried a combustible cigarette. So what exactly is vaping? To put it really, really simply, vaping is just inhaling and exhaling an aerosol produced from an e-cigarette or a vape pen. There's lots of different language that we use, and especially young people, they don't necessarily refer to these products the same way that we refer to them, but they all sort of work in the same way. They heat and aerosolize an e-liquid, which is inhaled and exhaled by the user of the device. The devices can be called e-cigarettes, they can be called vapes, vape pens, tanks, mods, or a lot of times by young people, they can be called by the brand name. So Juul, Bo, Blue, and there can be a lot of variability there. This picture is just showing you a couple of examples of e-cigarettes. And then the way that we think about the types of products, we can sort of classify them to sort of make sense of it a little bit more. There are rechargeable devices, which are a little bit more expensive than the disposable devices. The disposable devices, of course, are sort of one-time use. They're pre-filled with the nicotine. The battery is pre-charged, and once you've used up all the nicotine, they're done. You toss it. The rechargeable devices are meant for multiple uses. So they're either a pod system, which the gray product over on the end, you can see right up on the top, there's a pod attached to it, and I'll show you some, but that's a Juul. That device is called a Juul. And the way that works is that the pod, or the cartridge, that is pre-filled with nicotine, and you would put it into the device, which you charge whenever the battery needs to be charged, and when the nicotine is gone from the cartridge, you toss the cartridge and you put in a new cartridge. So the only disposable part of that would be the nicotine component. Another type of rechargeable device would be the vape pens and the tank system. So these are bigger devices, more expensive. The difference here is that instead of having pre-filled cartridges, the user of the device actually would fill these with any flavor of e-liquid that they wanted to, and you can see on the vape pens, the sort of clear-ish areas, that's where you would fill up the nicotine there. So specifically about Juul, I just want to sort of show it to you a little more clearly, because Juul is what is really, really, really popular among middle school, high school, college-aged youth. Juul has the majority of the e-cigarette market. They're extremely, extremely popular, and it's not by accident. They're very small. I have some for you to see. They can really fit right in the palm of your hand. They're very sleek, easy to conceal. They look like a flash drive. They're very techy, and they come with these pre-filled pods that you can see up on the screen, and one of these pods, they come in packs of 4, one of the pods has as much nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes. So and again, I mentioned it at the beginning, a real underlying issue here with all of this is the nicotine, but specifically with Juul, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. One pod is as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. Young people are telling me, and my colleagues have heard it anecdotally as well, that high schoolers can go through a pod in a day, or a pod every 2 days. That's a real lot of nicotine. It's the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes a day. So young people are becoming addicted to nicotine very quickly, 1 to 2 weeks. They're able to consume a lot of nicotine with a Juul or another e-cigarette, much more so than they would be able to with a combustible cigarette, because this aerosolized form of nicotine is less harsh. It's not harsh and difficult like a cigarette would be to smoke. I just also wanted to show you just a very, very, very small sampling of pictures of some other e-cigarettes. I always encourage people just to Google e-cigarette or vape pen or vapes and look at the images that come up if you are curious, to really see a much broader sample of examples here. They're always evolving, there's always something new, and oftentimes the products are small and sleek. So whether these products are the pod-based systems that I mentioned, or the vape pens or tanks where the user of the device would add in their own nicotine, the commonality here is that the nicotine is in liquid form. So we call this an e-liquid. The way that the e-liquid works in the device is that it's heated. So it is in liquid form, and it says up on here, there's showing you a really simplified drawing, but in that cartridge area, whether you fill it as the user yourself or it's pre-filled, but that nicotine in the cartridge area is heated and aerosolized. So it's not vaporized, even though we call this vaping, we call them vapes or vape pens. It's not vaporized, it's aerosolized, and then it would be inhaled and exhaled by the user of the device. So what's in that aerosol? What's in that cloud that you maybe see or maybe don't see, and I'll talk about that. But what is in that aerosol? There's almost always nicotine. There are flavorings like diacetyl, which is linked with popcorn lung, which is a permanent scarring of the lung tissue. There's heavy metals, actually, because all of these devices have batteries and heating coils, so actually some of the metals from those components can be found in the aerosol. There's glycerin, there's propylene glycol, there's benzene, and unfortunately it's a really open-ended and other stuff that we don't know the full answer of right now. E-cigarettes are very new. We don't have the long-term public health data. We don't have the full picture here. What we do know for now, and what we know for sure for now, is that there are some components of this aerosol that is really not good and not safe to have in your lungs. And again, coming back to nicotine, we do know that there is almost always nicotine in here. And we know that nicotine is very addictive, and we actually can't be sure how much nicotine exactly are in these products. The FDA does not fully regulate e-cigarettes. They don't regulate the manufacture of e-cigarettes. Just one picture to show you an example of really not being aware of how much nicotine is in an e-liquid. I'm not sure if you can read it, but the very top, up on this side, it says this product does not contain nicotine. The last ingredient listed is nicotine, and that's right on the same bottle where you see that inconsistency. Specifically with young people, though, you know, your 13-year-old really doesn't have any reason to believe that if a label says something, it's not true. You know, if your child has a peanut allergy, they know that if they read a food label and that food item does contain peanuts, it has to say this product contains peanuts. So my point is, a lot of young people started using e-cigarettes not realizing that the products contain nicotine, whether it's because the product itself said it doesn't contain nicotine, whether it's maybe because that's what they heard from their friends or what they heard from social media or whatever the reason may be. But a lot of young people began using this and became addicted, not realizing that there was an addictive substance in here. So some frequently asked questions. Are e-cigarettes safe? No, e-cigarettes are not safe. The CDC has said that e-cigarettes are not safe for youth, young adults, pregnant women, anyone who doesn't currently use tobacco products. Is secondhand vape safe? We know that secondhand vape or aerosol isn't safe either. So this is a real big issue in schools, either in the bathrooms or hallways or school buses. When you have someone who is vaping and maybe there's someone in the bathroom stall right next to them who's not vaping, who maybe is still inhaling that exhaled cloud of vapor, they are potentially also getting some of the negative effects from that aerosol that the person vaping is getting because they're participating in that, but you know, there could be someone right nearby who's not doing it, who could still suffer from the negative secondhand effects. But again, we really do need more long-term research to fully understand. Another big question is, can e-cigarettes be used to vape other substances? The answer to this is yes. Anything that can be a liquid can be vaped. So THC, CBD, anything at all that can be a liquid. If the product is meant to be refilled by the user, so an open system, it's very easy, of course. You can just fill in any liquid that you wanted. If it's a pod-based system where you buy the pre-filled pods, there are YouTube videos very easy to find where you can just figure out, you can learn how to hack that pod and fill it up with whatever you want. How do you know if young people are vaping? Another really big question. Often, if you are smelling like popcorn or cotton candy and you don't see that food item, that could be a sign that someone is vaping. If you're smelling something that really doesn't make sense, so the unexplained smells. But again, it gets tricky when you're in a school setting. There's a lot going on in the hallway, in classrooms and bathrooms. There's, again, over 8,000 flavors of e-liquids, so it very well could be maybe a perfume that you're smelling, or a hand sanitizer, or a food item. So the unexplained sweet smells are something to look out for, but it's not a catch-all. And then unfamiliar products is another thing to look out for. Something sort of techy, or a device you're not sure exactly what it is, take a second look at that, see if you can find any sort of writing on it or name or brand, and search it if you're not sure what it is. When we just got up here, Allison said, "Oh, I thought this was a Juul." So, and this is the clicker for the PowerPoint, so really just goes to show you that anything can be an e-cigarette. It's not a Juul, though. So I put this quote up here, and I'll read it to you, just kind of to go back to the tactics, to really go back to the why. Why are we where we are right now with so many youth who are using nicotine? So this is a quote from Philip Morris. "Today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer, and the overwhelming majority of smokers first begin to smoke while still in their teens. The smoking patterns of teenagers are particularly important to Philip Morris." So really just to clear up any confusion that this is intentional. Just to recap, the emergence of vaping products is really taking a page out of the old playbook of industry tactics. Before there were flavored vaping products, there were other flavored tobacco products that youth were using. You can see here this data that I mentioned earlier showing you the huge decline in youth use of combustible cigarettes. That's the red line. It starts up at 35% in 1995, dropping all the way down to about 6.5% in 2017. A huge drop-off, huge progress was made in decreasing the youth use of combustible cigarettes. And then that purple bar right up at the top is showing you, that's the e-cigarette data. So really popping right back up there. So what can you all do? You can educate yourselves, and you're here, and that's a really, really important first step. I'm going to share some more resources on how you can continue to do that. You can be aware of the tobacco and vaping industry's tactics. Again, that's what we're doing here today. Knowing laws, both state laws and local laws, is really important. Educating youth in whatever capacity you all are able to. Talking with youth as trusted adults is extremely important. And then I'm going to share some other resources with you. So to continue educating yourselves, the #1 best resource that I recommend you check out is getoutraged.org. Up on Get Outraged, there are frequently asked questions, there are pictures, there are fact sheets, there's an entire toolkit of information and resources for schools. Everything that I've talked about, this PowerPoint, everything is up on getoutraged.org. The Surgeon General's report and the CDC, also really great resources. For further education in terms of the industry tactics that I mentioned, specifically around menthol, mint, and wintergreen, partner with me to sort of dive deeper into learning about the history of the industry tactics. Black Lives, Black Lungs is a short documentary that really gets into this topic, and I'm happy to partner with anyone in hosting a viewing and discussion about this to really deepen learning around that. In terms of knowing state laws, this is really important as well. So at the end of 2018, new state laws around tobacco went into effect. Banned the sale of tobacco in pharmacies, expands the smoke-free workplace law to include e-cigarettes, and raised the minimum legal sales age to 21. If you want to know more specifically about what is going on in your town, in Fall River, in your community, you can go to makesmokinghistory.org, and right on the homepage, the My Community tab, you can just search in the drop-down menu, and you can see what specific regulations. You can search it for every town in Massachusetts. You can see if they have the flavor restriction that we talked about, if they have the permit cap. Everything is up right on makesmokinghistory.org. You can also share the facts with your community, whether that means going to Make Smoking History Facebook page and sharing information, partnering with me through any media outlets. Really let me know how I can help with that, and I'm a free resource to you. Educating youth is also really, really important there, and I have some handouts that I would encourage you to all come up and grab at the end. But educating youth is really, really important. There are a number of free curriculums that the schools can use, and that's, again, all on Get Outraged in that school toolkit. But there's also a new youth information campaign through the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts. And this poster is, part of it. They have digital and social media ads that were running from April to June of 2019. There's posters, handouts, mirror clings. These paid ads are actually running again right now. And these were materials developed with youth input, the messaging, the visuals, all of it was in collaboration with youth. So they're really messages and designed to really educate youth. And these are those curriculums that I was talking about. These are free best practice resources that we really encourage schools to use. What's really, really important here is talking with youth in whatever capacities you all can. Whether you're a parent or you're an educator or you're a grandparent or you're an aunt and uncle, having conversations with young people as someone they trust is really, really, really important. Dispelling the myths and really naming it, you know, I think it's just so important to just, you know, say it for what it is. It's not water vapor. If you hear a young person talking about their e-cigarette and they're saying that it's water vapor, have that conversation. Dispel the myths, state the facts, help them learn more information, maybe share those resources from the youth campaign. Be willing to listen. Ask the youth in your life what they see, what they think, what their friends are doing, and really be someone that they can talk to and someone that they can come to with questions, if they need information, if they need help quitting, and I'll share some resources on that as well. There's really not a perfect time to talk. There's not a perfect place to talk, but it's just really, really important that you do have these conversations. Be open, be honest. If you're a tobacco user or if in the past you were a tobacco user, you know, share your story, share maybe any struggles that you've had. I hear a lot the advice to have the conversation in the car, so you maybe don't have to, you know, sit across a table from someone and look them in the face. It's maybe sometimes easier if you're sort of doing something else to have the conversation, but in whatever way that makes sense, having the conversation, being honest and open, dispelling the myths. Something that youth can get involved in is called the 84 movement, and this is, it can either be a group of youth at a school or at any youth organization, and this is a organization and a movement all across Massachusetts. There are chapters in all areas of the state, and it's a really awesome thing for youth to get involved with. They're fighting back against the industry. They participate in a really awesome event in the spring where they go to the State House for Kick Butts Day. They do projects within the school. There's mini grants available. It's a really great way for young people to be involved in both fighting back against the industry, but also educating their peers. Doing that peer-to-peer education can be a really great way to further the education within the school. So hopefully youth are hearing from their parents and their teachers and their friends messages about e-cigarettes. So this last slide is what you can do to help youth quit. And I'll leave this one up here for a little bit. And I have a handout for this as well. These are new resources, really, really important at this point in time where there are lots of young people who do need help quitting. So always encourage young people to work with the school nurse or counselor or a coach and their doctor. But also some other resources available. This is Quitting. It's powered by Truth. There is a specific Massachusetts text word that they can text and they can enroll in this program. It's free, it's confidential. My Life, My Quit is, again, trained youth coach specialists, and this is either phone counseling or text and online chat. And this program is also very new. This My Life, My Quit program is through the same program as the Free Smokers Helpline in Massachusetts, that 1-800-QUIT-NOW number where adults can receive free phone counseling, but it's just specifically for young people. So that's a really necessary development that I'm very happy to share with you as a resource. And then Smoke Free Teen also, I believe, has an app and text services as well. And I think that's all I have on here. Oh, I have one more slide for additional resources, but I think I already talked about all of it except for the mass.gov/vaping site for updates. I know there's a lot right now. This is all very timely information with the temporary vape sales ban, with the vaping-related illnesses that we are seeing. If you want updates specifically on that, the mass.gov site is a really important resource as well. And then I also didn't mention yet the Massachusetts Health Promotion Clearinghouse, but I do have a handout for you on that. So the free materials for youth that I mentioned, and then some adult education materials are all available for free to either download PDF version or to order paper copies of, and I have a handout just explaining how to do that, but it's free and they come in really quick. Any questions?
No, it is. No, it is. Okay. Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah.
You know, Marissa was talking about it being the top priority at the State House, and it is. It's as soon as Wednesday we are in session. It could happen on Wednesday, but there's already been a commitment by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate that we will develop some legislation between now and then. There's not many weeks left. So I know that they're working on something. I believe it will probably be a ban that will, for all vaping, excluding THC, although I could be wrong. And it will also include flavored cigarettes like menthol, and maybe perhaps Allison, sure, you could fill us in. Allison is in touch with the legislator who has penned that. She was in my class, Gregoire. So please, Allison.
Yeah, so what we're looking at, I think to Marissa's point, is that we know flavors are the main reason that kids are using these products. So the bill would ban all flavors of all tobacco products. So that would be vaping as well as menthol cigarettes, wintergreen skull, grape cigars, anything that's flavored that is a tobacco product would be banned. That would mean that vape products, unlike the current governor's ban, vape products themselves would still be available, they just would not be flavored, and this doesn't touch anything to do with marijuana as well. So the legislature will break for their kind of holiday break in November 20th. Our hope is that this will be done before then. We are hopeful that it will be next week. But I'm happy to answer any questions on it. We have a fact sheet on it as well as a number of handouts on the issue.
Okay, before we do that with questions, I wanted Dr. Ann Doggin to, she's Assistant Superintendent of Schools here in Fall River, and I know she has lots of information about right here in our community and concerns that we all have. There are many parents there, many parents watching this Fred TV. We want to thank Fred TV and the Fall River Herald News for being here this evening. As you mentioned, it's so vitally important to educate not only our youth, but parents, educators, business people. So many people are affected by this in their families. So our biggest concern in the legislature has been youth vaping. And we've talked about this for the last several weeks. And you know, there's some interesting information that perhaps, Doctor, you could share with us.
Sure, thank you. Thank you again for having me, and also to those that came out to hear this presentation this evening. Last spring, we administered the Youth Risk Behavior Survey to over 1,400 students at Durfee High School. We looked at those students that were in the 9th, 10th, and the 11th grade, and the statistics that we found mirror what you have found across the state. We were asking youngsters such questions as, sexual activity, use of alcohol, etc. And vaping overwhelmingly came out as the #1 issue that concerned us the most. I'm here this evening with our Director of Health and Wellness, Michelle Sharp, who's in the audience, as well as our head nurse leader, Karen Long, and we can assure you that we are looking at now ways to implement into our curriculum with our students, just as we did with tobacco, just as we did with alcohol, looking at ways now where we can teach the kids the effects of, the negative effects of the vaping. Michelle is part of a group with superintendents and districts alike that are actually writing now a vaping curriculum that will be implemented statewide as well. So again, they're here if you should have any questions as well. And again, thank you for bringing this to everybody's attention.
Thank you, Doctor. You know, I'm so happy to hear about the curriculum, the possibility of a curriculum for next session with our students, because this is a huge issue. And although the ban may exist in the Commonwealth based on legislation soon, and I think that's going to happen, and I'm happy to hear that. The federal government is talking about a ban of some type as well. I've been reading it. They've stated they're going to do something. That was 2 weeks ago. We haven't seen much.
No, there is a possibility that there'll be an announcement from the administration potentially this week. With anything on the federal level, it will be recommendations that go to the FDA, and then the FDA will implement them. We have been waiting for graphic warning labels since 2006 that still haven't happened, so I wouldn't hold our breath for the federal government to act quickly.
So many of these products, you know, that you have seen, and I know that some of them will be passed out soon for you to take a look at. Many of them contain substances that are not in the vaping pods that you see if you purchase THC or cannabis at a medical cannabis distributor or even recreation. Those chemicals are absent. We've heard lots of things about vitamin E that's been added to some of this juice, this vaping juice that is on the market, hundreds of labels. CDC, as I mentioned before, we're waiting to hear with their data collection, but you can imagine how difficult that is to go through all of the chemistry in those pods of the hundreds of different types of uses. Not only the pod itself, but the devices, as we heard that there is metal, actually, aluminum and tin and lead that could be ingested into the lungs. So this is a huge issue. You know, one of my questions I had was, you know, not so long ago, you know, vaping was not even heard of in Massachusetts, as far as I'm aware of. Perhaps it's been around a while, but it wasn't to the point where we see what the industry has turned into. You know, we saw those other states that were actively involved in having cannabis legalized years ago, in Colorado and other places. We didn't hear any of these pulmonary disease issues. But this has suddenly crept up. And now there are thousands of cases in the nation. We're seeing hundreds here in the Commonwealth. And we have to do something to stop it. One of the, you know, the folks that have been walking around at the State House are those small business owners who sell this product. And while we're sympathetic to those individuals who've opened up small business, our priority is public health, and it has to be public health. So I'm very supportive of the ban. I'm hoping that we get it on the floor soon. I hope it's this week, but
Things can be next week.
It could be next week. Nothing moves quickly in Boston, I'll tell you, because there's always some complexity, always some issue. But I'm hopeful that that's going to happen soon. And now, I think we could go to some questions, if anyone has any questions. Yes?
So it varies from school to school, but basically it's, adequate supervision for our youngsters. Youngsters are told, the rules and regulations, and it's up to them in many ways. We certainly know in our newer buildings there are cameras everywhere, but basically it's, educating our youngsters that this type of behavior is not allowed in our school system.
And I know it's going on in the classroom. Dr. Malone mentioned to me that one of the things that they're talking to students about, and I know you're involved, talking to students about this seriousness of what's happening right now in the Commonwealth with this vaping and how dangerous that is. I think that's so important. Sometimes we hear, well, there's no curriculum yet in the schools, but that doesn't mean the schools are not doing anything. Believe me, they are, because they know as educators that this is very serious. And they want to be sure that this message gets out to parents and to the students themselves, who, in many cases where you're talking high school students, they're of age where they have part-time jobs, they can afford to buy. You saw how inexpensive these products are, where they can afford to buy these vaping devices or the Juul or other items and get them. Now, right now there's a ban, obviously, in Massachusetts, but New Hampshire is still selling the product. Those communities in Massachusetts, New Hampshire has seen such an incredible jump. People coming from Mass to purchase the vaping devices and the juice, the substance. So happily, Rhode Island also has the ban in place. And there are several states in the country, but only a few in comparison. When you think of the numbers of people who have been affected by a serious pulmonary disease and death, I am surprised, and that's why I think the federal government will be doing something shortly. Does anyone have anything else to add? I can't believe any other questions. Yes.
An electronic product, only 5% have smoked cigarettes. At the middle school level, 16.3% have used a electronic product, and we have an uptick now in cigarette smoking. Is that another? 8.7%.
Incredible. So as we had, thank you for that information. So as we have seen by the charts that Marissa had up there on the PowerPoint, combustible tobacco use has come down. Now, many say it has come down, obviously, because we have vaping, and that is, of course, risen. Now we ban the vaping product. The concern here is that many who are addicted to nicotine now, because you heard the amounts of nicotine that were in those pods, that with the absence of vaping, many will go back to tobacco use. We'll have to see if that occurs. However, I think the education, the influence our educators have and parents have on our children could make all the difference in the world. It's great to see those numbers on combustibles down, but of course, our concern is always what's going to happen in the near future with the absence of vaping and vaping devices.
And I think some of the reason the tobacco numbers did go down in the 2000 range was because of education in schools, where kids really felt that they had learned that information. I think the hard part about this is that that kind of school education and the funding for that was certainly reduced, and so schools did not have enough resources to teach the kids about vaping, and that is certainly changing. And so I do think that the education alone and kids realizing that it's not just water vape, that it is not safe, that those people, as well as educating parents, and so that parents know what to look for and have those conversations with teens. These are kids that are using these products that would never have touched a traditional combustible cigarette. What we're seeing, especially from superintendents and athletic directors, is that these are kids that, very quickly the discipline is changing. They're not showing up to schools, they're absentees, they're getting kicked out of their sporting events or losing opportunities to be, recruited or have scholarships for sports because they're losing a third of their season because they're so addicted to the vape that they can't stop. And so I think, the more education, the more that kids know. So I do think that schools, hopefully with getting rid of the flavors, making them more expensive to buy by putting a tax on them, I think those pieces will certainly help, but the education and the funding for that education is vitally important for the schools. So I think that's a big piece of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, I want to thank all of the presenters, Marissa from the Tobacco Free Community Partnership, Allison, of course, from Government Relations, Director of American Heart Association, and Dr. Ann Dargan, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and all of you for being here. I know that we have a number of items for you to take with you, and I know that Marissa has some implements so that you can take a look at what the pod looks like, what the Juul looks like, and many of the other vaping devices. And again, thank you all so much for attending. Thanks.